been asked to do it tonight. And I have got a speech. 12 pages, we've all got half an hour, yeah. Thank you. So, good evening. How far away? Do we go here or do we go here? Just there. Oh, I didn't know, I was practicing microphone techniques today. Right, good evening. Funnily enough, good evening. As the youngest person in the room, I'd like to welcome Mr. Captain Terry, Scottish hero Jimmy McElroy, my fellow Scots and the rest of you. I'd like to thank you all for gathering together in memory of Robert Burns. For those of you who don't know me, and there's probably not a great deal of you, my name is Blair Christie, and I'm a member here, and I work at the golf club as well. Had I not been speaking, I'd have probably been serving you tonight. When Jim asked me to do the Immortal memory this year, I was very pleased and grateful, because it's a challenge I've never even been asked or encountered before. I've done groups of 40 and things, but never on, I think it's 92 or so tonight, so thank you very much, Jim. Admittedly, I did add this, admittedly the baton had probably been passed around the rest of the Scots in the club, but I appreciate it anyway. Thank you very much for picking me. So this evening I'll be giving an Immortal memory where you'll be able to understand all of it, because as you can tell, I've not been in Scotland a great deal of time.
Well, but you'll do, Jimmy.
When I began writing this speech, I was worried because I myself don't know much about Robert Burns. This is my first Burns supper tonight. I obviously had to do some research about his life and work, and so I relied on my skills from university and employed our good friends at Google to find 16 million hits to choose from. Little did I know, I would find a video of Willie Hamilton doing this a couple of years ago, where he grumbled about not getting an iPad for Christmas to use for his speech. Well, Willie, I didn't either. Robert Burns is the only figure from arts and literature to be celebrated across the world during a night of rituals and poetry. This is an industry that included the likes of Shakespeare, Wordsworth, and the Brontes, and many, many more writers. This alone emphasises the greatness and popularity of his work. He was born in 1759 and died in 1796 at the young age of 37. He was brought up in poverty on a farm in Ayrshire. That's where I'm from, if anyone's wondering. True. With little professional education.
Which is also where you're from.
I like to think that I prepared that gap, but I didn't. His father taught him from home, and between harvests he would sometimes go to school to learn more subjects like Latin and French. Burns' first piece of work was a song he wrote when he was 15 called Handsome Nell. He sang, "Oh, once I loved a bonny lass, and oh, terrible. It's the first one, I'll get the Scottish accent soon. Oh, once I loved a bonny lass, and I love her still, and whilst that virtue warms my breast, I love my handsome Nell." Considering this is the first verse of the man's career, it's no surprise that he became one of the most famous Scottish people ever to live. I decided to try and modernise our thoughts and feelings about Robert Burns by imagining what he would be like if he lived in today's society. Modern technology allows us to communicate with each other across continents in an instant using Facebook, Twitter and Skype, to name a few. Robert Burns would have thrived under such conditions. As many of you know, he was a bit of a ladies' man and was no stranger to writing some exquisite love poetry. He wrote to a friend when he was 29 saying, "I myself can confirm, both from bachelor and wedlock experience, that love is the alpha and the omega of human enjoyment. All the pleasures, all the happiness of my humble compeers flow immediately from this delicious source. It is the spark of celestial fire which lights up the wintry hut of poverty and makes the cheerless mansion warm, comfortable and gay. Burns felt that love is the core of life. His poetry stood the test of time and to this day still sounds as beautiful as it did when he put pen to paper. One of his more famous poems, A Fond Kiss and Then We Sever, where he wrote, "I'll never blame my partial fancy, nothing could resist my Nancy, but to see her was to love her, love but her, and love forever. Had we never loved so kindly, had we never loved so blindly." Terrible place to change page. I'll repeat the last line. Had we never loved so blindly, never met or never parted, we had never been broken-hearted. So back to Burns in the modern era. Should Burns have lived today, he would probably be a member of several dating websites. He would probably use apps like Snapchat and Skype to serenade women with poems of love in order to seduce them. But, by the way, none of you probably know what Snapchat is, but... To those that do, it started as a means of sending photos of oneself and videos, if anyone fancied it. Well, I'll finish there, but yes. But of course, love was not the only thing that Burns spoke about. He had opinions on many things. One that got him into trouble with his friends was his position on the French Revolution. He saw this as a chance to move away from what he felt was a scene of sorrow mixed with strife. For instance, in The Tree of Liberty, he expresses how the revolution in France was a progressive step forward for their freedoms and rights. He wrote, "Let Britain boast her hardy oak, her poplar and her pine man. Old Britain once could crack her joke, and over her neighbours shine man. But seek the forest round and round, and soon it will be agreed man, that such a tree cannot be found between London and the Tweed man." This is telling us that Burns feels that Britain were not the powerhouse that they once were, and that change may provide what people want. We cannot be certain that this is Burns' work because he never laid claim to it. Had he written this poem today, he could have been more open, without fear or punishment because of our laws of freedom of speech. Now those of you who know me will agree that I couldn't do a speech tonight without mentioning golf in one way or another. Poetry is open to interpretation by the reader. I have come to the conclusion that Burns, before it was even widely invented, knew how we would all feel about golf today. Oh, stroking was good in February, and kissing sweet in May, but what signifies a young man's love if it didn't last for always? Suggesting that we stroke it well in February and enjoy it most in the spring conditions of May. On the other hand, I may have completely misinterpreted this, and stroke it well in February may mean something else altogether. In the 250 years since Burns' time, people have dissected his poems and songs to understand what Burns felt during the 18th century. It is down to Burns suppers everywhere to celebrate and commemorate Robert Burns, so that people are not lost in the entanglement of text-speak, abbreviations, and frankly, crap English. Despite the changes in culture, it's still good for us to appreciate the work that Burns produced, remembering that where we don't use it in everyday life, it can still have a role to play in our society. If it be through Tam O'Shanter or Auld Lang Syne, either way, Burns is still very much with us today. So if I could ask you to raise a glass and stand up. And toast to the immortal memory of Robert Burns.
Bobby Burns, bless his soul.
Thank you.